Thank you, Charles. And just before I start, I just want to mention that the projects that Charles referred to were done in conjunction with my design partner at that time, Stephanie Robb. We no longer work together, but she was instrumental in all three of the projects that Charles just mentioned. Well, firstly, I want to thank all of you for coming today. I know that the new James Bond movie opened this weekend, and I just appreciate so much that you're choosing this over that. Today's talk is called Hallucinating in Public, and I just want to preface the talk by saying that somewhere in around grade 4 in my social studies class, I had to write a report on Swaziland, and I spent way too much time on the cover page. I just went on for days, and then I just sort of did the report after, and the teacher sent back a report card saying, you know, great title page, but, you know, the rest of the stuff, did you steal that from National Geographic? And of course, we all were stealing it from National Geographic. But this little intro animation I spent the last couple of days working on, and it's probably going to be the best part of the talk, so enjoy that, and I hope you like the rest of it. So I decided to name the talk Hallucinating in Public, mostly because I thought it was a great title, and then it dawned on me about a week ago that I had to create a lecture around it, and it took a little bit of soul searching to try and really connect why I would be talking about hallucinating in public as an idea for a lecture. So when you look at the definition of hallucination, which is from Merriam-Webster, perception of something as a visual image or sound with no external cause, usually arising from a disorder of the nervous system, as in delirium tremens or functional psychosis without no neurological disease. It's a disorder of the nervous system or in response to drugs such as LSD. But the other definition is an object perceived during a hallucinatory episode. And I'm more interested in the second definition. The synonyms for hallucination gave me more confidence that I could actually use the word in a lecture, in that some of them, such as daydreams, dreams, fancy, figment, fantasy, illusion, pipe dream, unreality, vision, were, I think, instrumental in how designers, architects, landscape architects, artists project things into the world. Its antonym of truth and verity, I kind of took umbrage with that because, you know, for those of us who are out there making things, the things that we're projecting have as much truth to us as things that don't yet exist in the world. My favorite website is called the Visual Thesaurus. I think you should all have a look at it. You can use it for free for a month, but you can enter in a word and then it shows you its kind of connectors. And interestingly, when I went and looked up hallucinate, the word perceive and comprehend were the first two words that were attached to it. So it didn't kind of come with the pejoratives that are associated with LSD. And, oops. Also, when you went to hallucination, mind you, the definition exists somewhere between psychotic belief and delusion at one end and the object at the other. So again, for those, and I know many of you who are here today, because I recognize about half the group, are people who make things in the world. And I think you would appreciate the fact that when you're postulating something in the world, you are put into a state, you could call it a form of creative psychosis, where you're really projecting something that doesn't yet exist in the world, and then starting to form all of the rationale, the decision-making, the strategy for having it come into being. So we do things like we make sketches. Things that talk about relationships of pieces and bits within the urban field, for example. This is a sketch of Granville Street. And even the architect now is part of a kind of marketing and media program that elevates that status of daydreaming art projects into being useful for selling things like condos. So I'm going to show you a YouTube of Gregory Henriques, starring Gregory Henriques, who's daydreaming the new Telus Gardens project. In the process of this video, you'll see that, and this is used on the marketing website, that that elegiac state that we exist in when we're dreaming up a work is of almost mythic status. Sorry about this. I'll keep talking while this is being taken care of. So you can see in that video the daydream of Gregory. And Gregory's a friend, so please don't think I'm maligning him in this. But it's just interesting that the role of the architect is illustrated in this way. And thank you. And the devices of just the digital devices of describing how his daydream, his hallucination is coming into being is used in the service of selling space, where you'll be doing yoga, you'll have magnificent cocktail parties with people that represent all races in the world. Nature will be in balance, the views will be extraordinary, the value of your investment will be, multiplied. And so even though there's a kind of levity to this, I think we all know from operating within this world that what we do is connected to the development of commodity and experience in the world. And it's quite an amazing responsibility. These are I just grabbed these. These are all towers that are about to be built in the Lower Mainland. And this is a new complex going up in Burnaby, for example. And in this hallucination of a future, somehow the architect now has the tools to build a transparent building, which I thought, that's pretty good. Won't take up a lot of space in the world. Also, we hallucinate in the public. We bring images or imaginings of the public into the spaces that we are projecting. And they're all riding bikes, they're having a great time, they're comfortable, they're drinking coffees. And one really has to look at these and understand that they represent a kind of a idealized version of what the city is. And sometimes when I walk down Hastings, I think, what's the richest people space in the city is that one block kind of near United We Can, where the people of the downtown east side are it's just throbbingly busy. But that's not the kind of imagery we project when we're selling condominium complexes. We also create legislative and regulatory frameworks for the construction of our hallucinations. The view corridor system in Vancouver, for example, which protects the view to the mountains from several key spots, particularly on the south side, the west side and the south of Falls Creek, is a framework that is put into place to allow that image to the image of our towers and our mountains to cohabitate. So I think you could say that you could look at hallucination as a kind of form of making a kind of conjecture about the world. And in my studio's case, we kind of have been thinking about this lately, particularly since the title was chosen, and trying to think of, really what are some of the techniques that we use as devices to actually give back that hallucination to those who are going to be encountering it. So I was mentioning to Charles that with the kind of closing down of many of the functions of the city as we know it, say the theaters are closing on Granville now, so there's less space of entertainment there, and no doubt they'll be supplanted by more liquor licenses. The city, I mean, I guess the way I think about the work out of our studio is that it's an attempt to rebalance some of those losses of phenomena or diversity within how we build what we replace back in. So one of the devices we use is repetition. This is sheet music from Steve Reich, and I don't know if you know his music, but it's almost a hypnotic set of kind of repeated patterns that shift over time. And you can see in the note structure that there are these common patterns that evolve. And these are candles that I photographed in a church in Winnipeg recently. The other thing we do is we work with scale change, because when you change the size of an object relative to a person, suddenly they're put into a kind of, for lack of a better word, kind of fairy tale state of reassessing their own position or size in the world. So today I'm just going to talk about 4 projects, and 2 of them are probably projects that very few people have seen. And, well, one doesn't exist yet because it's still in a hallucinatory state. The other 3 are in process or are already completed. The first one is a public art piece that's going to be built in Richmond called Closer Than, and it uses the device of repetition and reflection. Second project is the Granville Lights installation, which again uses repetition and perspective. The third is the Little Spirits Garden, which is just being finished in Victoria, and it uses repetition and scale. And then the fourth is a recent piece that just completed in Winnipeg called Emptyful, and it uses scale and illusion. So let's start with Closer Than. The namesake for this piece comes from that ubiquitous stamp that that everybody has in their rearview mirror that says objects in mirror are closer than they appear. And the site for it was given to us as a wall that's going to be built a meter away from this glass wall at the Brighouse SkyTrain station in Richmond. A new building is going up just 3 feet away, and for the length of this glass wall, a solid concrete wall is being constructed that will have a parking structure behind it. And so that was given to us in the competition for the site. One of the things that that I observed when going there was that Richmond is in a state of intense densification right now, and whereas I think it used to be a place where the horizon was very visible, now not so much. You have to get up quite high to see it, and it is a flat place. So we floated many ideas around the studio, but came up with the idea of using reflection as a device. And we landed on the idea of convex mirrors potentially as a solution. We only have really 6 to 8 inches to play with, because the space between the glass and the wall is so narrow. Somebody has to be able to get down in between those 2 spaces and clean the windows of the SkyTrain station. So we tried to find something that was flat that would give a lot of dimensionality. And so stumbled upon the idea of using convex mirror, both for its reference to security devices that are used in every 7-Eleven, but also because it has a role in our history as a kind of way in which the artist, and by extension culture, became represented in a piece of art. So for example, in this piece by Van Eyck, there's that famous convex mirror where the artist painted himself into the image. So our proposition is to, and we won this competition with this proposition, is to put 388 mirrors that are just under a meter in diameter up on that wall, and to have to have them serve as a referent back to the sky that will be disappearing, that you can see now when you look out of the window, but with a new building going in, suddenly your horizontal view will be gone. So these mirrors will be tilted skyward. The top four will be tilted skyward to let the view of the sky back into the station. And the bottom four will be tilted groundward, because this is actually on the second floor, to reunite yourself with the ground. And the idea here is, in the process of tilting the top four up and the top four bottom, is to take away the roof of the SkyTrain station. So we modeled this and have set our parameters with this as an experiment in mind. But it's not only in the service of getting rid of the roof, but also in kind of connecting people coming off the platform with the things that are no longer seen. But beyond that, it's also, we're hoping it will become a generator of a kind of way of acting in space that might be a little bit more playful or have greater resonance than just walking down the escalator. Because suddenly you'll go in front of them. And I brought this was just the very first of little study models we did. We did much better models. I'll pass it around. But you can see when you look at yourself in here, you know, suddenly your sense of space becomes distorted. But also seeing yourself 8 or 10 times, you know, it's disconcerting at first. But when you think about it, we're doing that all the time through media like Facebook and whatever umpteen other self-promotional armatures are out there in the world for us to talk about ourselves. So this is an experiment. But I think more deeply, I've done some peripheral reading, but I should be doing more, that talks about the birth of seeing the image as a kind of birth of consciousness. And I'm hoping that this mass of mirrors represents Richmond and the people who are coming and going from that station in this kind of, well, let's say visually and spatially expanding way. And this is the view of it coming up the escalator. This is a model we built of little mirrors to test it out in a more precise way. And this is Gabriel in my office holding the mirror, and you can see that it does serve to create a horizon line because of the tilt. The next project is Granville Lighting one, and we worked with PWL Partnership Landscape Architects on this from about 2008. And when we were brought onto the team, we weren't brought on to produce anything that would be called art. We were just part of the design team. But we looked at, well, beyond fixing the road and all of the things the city had asked us, we kind of thought, well, what can we bring to this street that might elevate its status beyond just being all gussied up again? So one of the great things about Vancouver streets is that they're so straight. And so the first place we went was that we could kind of make an opportunity out of that perspectival, that there is a perspectival opportunity, and that the mere act of repetition when you see something in the distance is a very powerful condition. And you get that on Vancouver streets anyways when you see the lights at night along a straight street. But the other thing about Granville is it's very flat. Half of it is very, very flat, and the other half is very rolly. So there was at Crest at Georgia. So there was a kind of opportunity to explore the idea of repetition in two different ways. One that would produce southwards from the hump would produce a really straight line, and then northwards from the hump would produce a kind of undulating change in it, almost as if a ripple had gone through the wave. So we did a lot of studies. This is part of the psychotic part of, and we looked at lots of different options. For example, we had a pink light thing happening for a while with double fixtures, and we tried perspectives where we looked at them as white, or maybe with a blue light on top, or pink. And in the end, we just went with white because really, with all of the other phenomenal signage and activity that's on the street, these white lights we thought would be the most neutral and able to cohabitate with what's found along the street. But also, we wanted to make a system that could, when seen laterally across the street, wouldn't in any way conflict with the existing blade signage and is almost banal in character. And also that there's something kind of delicate, well, there's something very delicate, I think, about the social ecosystem of that street. And particularly, I'm a big fan of how lurid it is, particularly in the south section, because it provides an alternative, still kind of misbehaving little section of the city when everything else is becoming so sanitized. And the role of sanitization in the visual field of Vancouver is really well explored, by the way, in the current exhibition here about the loss of neon signage in the city. So this is the ultimate effect. It's actually quite a hard thing to photograph, and we don't really have great photos of it, but one of the effects that you get from lining things up ad infinitum is that it brings the end of the street kind of forward, because even though the lights get smaller, the intensity of them gets stronger, and in a way it folds the picture plane closer to you. So it's a way, you know, you could say, oh, this is a bit of bunk, but that's the way I experience it is when I'm in the street, it's almost like now it's more like, it's a bit more of a piazza, because the spatial consequence of those lights kind of makes a rounded condition at the end. And of course, from different points of view, it has different character. But it's not exactly, this is not, I think, what the city has in mind when they think of that perspective of people behaving nicely in the public realm. This was during the Stanley Cup, all the hoo-ha. This was a picture I took from the Sears building looking down. And I think that we are not yet exploiting the potential of gathering in our city. There's a great latent community out there who would love to spend more time out in the public realm given the right opportunities. And in this picture, you just see Granville Street erased by people. It's because you know, they were allowed to do it. And so for those of you who are out there protecting public space, I think this is something to carry forward. The last thing I want to say about Granville is after I spoke about it recently, a woman told me that for her, when she saw the lights, she saw them as the after image or the ghosts of the trees that were cut down to make Granville Street. So I sourced some archive pictures, and this is what Granville Street looked like. I think these are from 1875. Before they were removed. Granted, this is further down in the 30s. This is South Granville, but I would assume that the flat part of the downtown Granville looked very similar before it was built upon. So she saw those white lights as a reference there. It wasn't something that I thought of, but okay. The third project is called Little Spirits. It's a memorial and cemetery for infant deaths, stillborn children, and people who've lost little ones for any number of reasons. And it's in a cemetery called Royal Oak in Victoria. We began the project by well, actually, at first they asked us to produce a plaque wall where if people had named their babies, they would have a chance to put the name up. And we worked with the cemetery for 3 years to maybe ask them to reevaluate how that could be approached. And in the process, we found a site that was at the top of the cemetery on a knoll that was very beautiful. It has fir trees in the middle and is surrounded by arbutus trees. And by kind of mapping the site, we discovered that we could make a kind of looping system of circulation by not cutting down any trees, and also because there's a grade change, we could make a set of stairs from a lower road and a nice path from the upper. But moreover, we invented a whole kind of lexicon of potential memorials that, well, they kind of exist elsewhere, but this will be the first example of such a place in North America. I'll expand on that. This is the resultant site plan, and every one of these little pieces can take 24 little concrete spirit houses. And I brought you a sample of one to pass out. The idea is every family that, or person that's lost a baby will be given one of these by the cemetery. And the cemetery takes 300 a year, up to 300 a year as a public service from the lower Vancouver Island region. So there's that many babies being lost. Anyways, this little cast concrete house will be given to those people who lose their babies, and they can put something in it, a keepsake, or they can, I'm advocating that they can decorate the interior. That's still being discussed. And then they can bring these houses to the site, and there's a key. I'll pass this around. There's a key system that will connect that concrete to these little concrete steps that wind their way through the forest. And we stole the idea from Lego, not really because of its associative references to childhood, although one can't ignore that that's there, but mostly because Lego had already solved a connection problem that we wanted to play with. So these houses are designed to be able to be mortared into these little projecting knobs that will regulate their spacing on those concrete pieces. But the piece that we invented as the notch ended up becoming a secondary design theme in the entire project. For example, each little spirit house has a window in it that's the same shape, and the window has a shutter, a little cast shutter, which is to imply that the child's spirit is in the process of either drawing its window closed or opening it. It was a way to suggest sort of a latent movement. And we worked with these magnificent precast concrete people in Victoria. There's a facility there unlike anywhere I've ever seen in North America that can produce very fine precast elements. And they made molds of these steps. And then with Joe Daly, landscape architect in Victoria, who's our collaborator, we came up with a system to stack these precast elements and create that kind of walkway that I showed you. The number of potential homes that can be put on this site in this first phase is 3,000. So you can imagine what this is going to look like when all those little houses get attached. Moreover, we created a little pavilion that's a kind of centerpiece for the garden. And we took the arbutus bark as a kind of inspiration for the way in which it would be made. It's Corten steel, and it's this kind of ambiguous folding roof structure. And underneath it is a cast concrete dais of sorts where a ceremony can take place. And the roof is really, really, we made so many models of this. The roof is designed to have completely different personas depending on which way you look at it. It's only about 7 meters long, but in one axis it's a gateway into the project. When you're underneath it, it almost folds down like a piece of shedding arbutus bark. It has a feeling almost of some kind of creature or a bird from one point of view, and then from the other it's almost folding in on itself. And that's a view of it. The planting is just being done right now, and this is what you would see from the roadside when you come up to it. And this shows you the kind of scale of the trees relative to those precasts. And this, I just wanted to show you how this motif of that piece that I described gets reinterpreted in a number of ways. We had basalt boulders made for sitting on, and we've etched out these water pools using the same shape. And then in the ground plane, there are places as well for parents if they have ashes that they want to scatter on the site. There are these eddies where they can go into, and we've precast the same shape as the little stepping stones for people to stand on. And this is us just testing out, how they might start to sit on the site. And this is what you see when you first come up. A lot of it is quite hidden because of how the site's been choreographed. This is the dais that I was referring to that's made out of a very highly polished concrete surface. And under this dais is a cistern where if people want to inter their ashes, they can do it. Behind here is a little, it's essentially a hole, but it will be capped by a bronze bell that people can unscrew. And as they move the bell, it looks like a bell. There's actually a bell in it, and we're working with a casting facility right now to make that, as if it's going to be summoning the spirits to the site. In truth, the precedent for this comes from the cemeteries and temples in Japan, where they do have a system called the Jizu, which is where a little Buddha is placed for the loss of every child. So these sites are, you come to them and they are these remarkable, just endless repetitions of Buddhas. And some of them are different sizes and different scales, but to date, we had to find an ecumenical way to do this without referring to explicitly to one religion. That's where the house came from. Okay, the last project I'm going to show you is one just recently completed in Winnipeg, and it's called Empty Full. It was a competition to produce an art piece for the renovated plaza outside the main library of downtown Winnipeg, a library that was renovated by John and Patricia Petkow. So in the competition brief, they asked those selected to work with light, water, and ice. It's not the easiest thing to kind of think about. Also, they gave us a site that is only 1.5 meters wide by almost 20 meters long. So it's a really long rectangle. So back to this idea of kind of creating illusion. We thought, well, what can we do to kind of create a sense of depth of space where there is not any space? So the idea of a container came to the fore, and we worked on many different shapes for the container, and we had these funny sessions where we'd invite friends and say, what does that bottle look like? What does that bottle look like? And we did these matrices, and the ones that were more popular were the more scientific shapes. So we didn't really start with the idea of a beaker, but it seemed to make more and more sense because any other bottle shape had too many associative other associations that Winnipeg probably wouldn't want, like a very high rate of alcoholism in its downtown population and all those kinds of things. But somehow the thing that might be producing drugs seemed, whatever, acceptable. I guess everybody watches Breaking Bad or something. So the piece is called Empty Full because Winnipeg is a city of extreme amounts of space, and I think that space, having spent time there, is an incredible venue for daydreaming because it's so unfinished as a place, and the sense of sky is so large. Patricia talks about that when she talks about their ideas for the building. So it kind of led to this half empty, half full kind of idea. And so we worked with a fog generation company from California and several mechanical engineers to help us come up with an idea for a sculpture that would have a fog machine in it, a rain curtain, and would produce all of these different kind of essays on fullness, fullness and emptiness. Oops. There. And then, okay, how are we going to deal with ice? Well, we thought, well, what do we have to play with? We can't cast a big sheet of ice. That's too dangerous. There's a big parking ramp right behind this thing. So we just thought, well, we'll just use the snow. So it's happening. It finally happened yesterday. It snowed in Winnipeg. Somebody went down and took a video for me. It's not a very good video, so I can't show you. But when the snow comes through this lit volume, it changes its color, so it kind of looks like a snow globe because it's all open. So these are all my really bad videos that I took of some of the water phenomenon that this thing produces. And oops, for some reason they're not starting. Oh, I see. I have to click on. Just a sec here. Well, on my studio machine, these all ran and showed you all the different light phenomena that they produce, but it's not working here. So I can tell you about them. They all have different names. There's one called the Prom Queen, and she produces a lot of frothy white purples and lavenders. There's one called, it's hard to tell from here, but there's one called Stormy, which shows what a prairie electrical storm would be like if it was contained within a bottle. There's ones called the Mad Scientist, who kind of fills with these acrid colors and then changes into other acrid colors. There's the Northern Lights are replicated inside of it. I wish I could show you, but somehow this computer is not allowing me to do so.
How tall is it?
It's almost 12 meters high, so just about 3 stories, and it's about the same in width. And it's tilting at a 5-degree tilt so that the meniscus line of the water is parallel to the plaza. There's a fog system that comes up from nozzles on the top of the horizontal piece, and then there's a rain curtain that drops the water down. And the colors of Winnipeg are browns, beiges. You know, I think coming from here where we're surrounded by so much sort of saturated color, we almost can't appreciate it. But I was finding people were coming here at night to a plaza that nobody was coming to before, and it's partly was the agenda of the city to create something that would bring people in. And they're just sitting there and staring at it like people stare at a fire. So it kind of got me going with this idea about how one can produce productive hallucinations in the public realm. This is the beginning of an idea, but I think you know, we're under, what would you say? We're under intensifying our cities in a way. And we have to think about, at least in certain spots, ways to heighten the experience of people who, you know, who are fully have their 5 senses. And that was kind of the genesis of this talk today. So thank you very much. And I'm very open to questions.